Welcome to our Bloomberg television and radio audiences around the world. We're live in Las Vegas. This is Money 2020, and we're joined by OpenAI's CFO, Sarah Friar. And this is interesting. You have some history with Money 2020, history with fintech, but that's kind of the point. And so much of the focus to date on OpenAI has been, I guess, a personal use of ChatGPT. But let's start with the banks and finance. How much of that is made up in your business?
Yes, thank you, Ed. It's so great to be here, and you're right. Money 2020, I've seen it progress through the years. What an incredible event it is today. And we're here because our customers are here.
Right.
AI is happening right now. It's not experimental. It's not something that people are just playing around with. Banks, financial institutions, fintechs, people are using it today in their business.
Well, there's the Morgan Stanley case study.
Yeah.
You know, this week alone or past week, Bank of America has talked about how many patents it's got in machine learning and artificial intelligence. But do you actually have a tangible sense of what it is those financial institutions are doing with your large language models?
Yes, absolutely. So Morgan Stanley is a great example. In their wealth management business, they're using our models both to help wealth advisors be more productive. They're using it as a way to create better financial advice and outcomes for customers. We're seeing folks like Klarna use it in customer service. The CEO of Klarna has been very loud and proud on this front. That's another great case study in terms of productivity improvements. And then we have banks like BBVA that are using it all across their business. And that's really our message here. It's just get started. Get enterprise ChatGPT rolled out to your organization. See what your people do with it. Help them just get started, whether they're in marketing, in finance, in product. Everyone can have really interesting use cases.
Even if we are just getting started, can you help our audience understand how meaningful a contribution the financial services sector, fintech, makes to OpenAI's revenue?
Yeah, so today if you look at our largest verticals, areas like EDU, education, healthcare, but financials is probably third. And again, I think that's because they are typically early adopters. They're often willing to take that risk because they see the upside in terms of driving more revenue, but they also are very good at managing their cost and efficiency. And it's great when you get an early adopter like Morgan Stanley because it tends to lead the way. I can't think of a wealth management client today that's not coming to us to say, what do we need to do? How do we get started?
Banks in particular can be sensitive to pricing. There's a lot of curiosity, not just in sort of as a consumer how much I'm paying on a monthly basis for ChatGPT access, but at the enterprise level as well. Reports are, for example, at the corporate per user level, you're thinking at about $2,000 per head. How are you managing us? Give us insight into the pricing strategy.
Sure, so pricing is super interesting because we're really trying to think about value and what is this person getting from this tool? And I actually don't think we've done a great job of that yet ourselves. Despite that, we have 250 million weekly active users, and of that, 5-6% have actually converted to be plus customers, so they're paying. But if you look at the value, when we were rolling out O1, our reasoning model, and this is a model that stops and thinks for you. It actually does hard problems. I was watching a lawyer in action using it to create a brief, and at the end we said to him, what would you have paid for that? Like if you had a paralegal doing that, he was like easily $1,000 to $2,000 per hour. And this is someone who's using it, if it's an enterprise per seat, it's probably $60 per month. And this is someone who would have paid $1,000 to $2,000 per hour. So I think that there's a lot of value that is in the product today, but we are just trying to make sure people can get started, can actually see the outcomes, and over time we believe that value to price will come into alignment.
There's a balance, right, between what's of value to your customer, but also, you have to account for OpenAI's spending, which we talked about endlessly, particularly on the compute side. What is that balance in what works best for you and your customer base?
Yeah, so first and foremost, what's most important to us is to stay on the frontier. Building the frontier models, making sure that we are bringing, ultimately, AGI to the benefit of humanity. To do that, it's expensive. We have to invest in large-scale compute. And so to me, there's really two ways to finance that. It's either through the free cash flows of the business, spoken like a good CFO, or it's through raising equity and debt financing because investors can see the long-term potential of this business. So on the former, on the cash flows of the business, we want to make sure we keep growing that business I think we have been wowed at just the pace of growth, particularly on the consumer side. It's about 75% of our business today. But even our enterprise businesses, they are young, but they are already doing an incredible amount of annualized revenue. And we're really excited by the potential there.
For our Bloomberg television and radio audience worldwide, we're in Las Vegas at Money 2020, and we're speaking to the OpenAI CFO, Sarah Friar, and you talked there about the consumer business. Something very interesting is the future business model, ad-supported tiers, for example, very specifically segmented pricing. How do you think about that, Sarah?
Yeah, so I think you always want to stay open to alternate business models or ways that you can layer a new business model on top. Now, the key for us is always access. How do we make sure as many people as possible get access to this tool? And that's on a global stage, by the way. And so to do that, sometimes you do pivot away from just pure subscription models to models like ads. My last company was all ads, so I've definitely experienced this. I think ads have their place, but you have to be really mindful of where. I think in areas like commerce, ads are great, right? If I do a ChatGPT prompt for black high-heeled shoes, something I probably would do. I actually don't want a history of the black high-heeled shoe. I want 5 stores I could buy from right now, probably e-commerce. So that's why companies like Shopify are great customers of ours as well. But there are other places where actually the ad model doesn't make as much sense. You want to get the consumer to the answer they need as fast as possible. And I think that's where ChatGPT is a really very different platform from, say, something like Google search.
You are still relatively early in this role. But it's been 2 years since the original deal with Microsoft was negotiated, and that compute relationship is critically important.
Yes.
Will those terms change? Are they fluid, or are you just sticking to the contract that was on your desk when you arrived?
No, and it's actually longer than 2 years. Microsoft and OpenAI have been partners, I think, for actually almost 5 years. So they really came to us when we were a research lab. And the deal that we've worked with them is they do provide compute exclusively, and we give them the IP around artificial intelligence. So it's incredible. The products they're rolling out today are really built atop of OpenAI's AI. As we go forward and as we get bigger, we absolutely see a maturing in that relationship. And so for consumer benefit, we want to make sure consumers always get access to what they need. That will probably mean compute from more parties over time. Right? We did discuss the Oracle deal, or Oracle discussed it a few quarters back. And I think that's a good starting point for just how do we maximize compute so we maximize the impact for consumers.
The catchphrase or buzzword of this year, I think, has been ship product. But you're the CFO, and so there's a tension between the cost of doing so and the need to move quickly. I think Sam has denied recently reports that the next model will be out by year end. What can you tell us about the path forward there, the cadence of new models to come?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Ship product, product velocity, that is the mantra internally to OpenAI, and it's something I've just been so wowed by since I started, is just how fast we do ship products, right? Even in my short tenure, I've seen O1 come out, our reasoning model, that huge step forward from kind of what has been more the ChatGPT model series. We've launched things like advanced speech to the model itself. The O series, 4.0 and now 4.0 Mini. For example, 4.0 Mini, which is our distilled model, is 1/100th the cost of what the original ChatGPT 4 model was. That is incredible for developers, and that's why you see the API products be so successful. And again, it goes back to how do we get this into the hands of many? Developers are a force multiplier, and today I'm super proud. I think every single AI unicorn is built atop of OpenAI's API, and that will tell you how we are the frontier model.
I think when I started covering OpenAI, there was around 500 people at the company. It's probably nearer 2,000 now.
Yeah.
Part of that as the CFO is to keep talent, long-serving talent, happy. My understanding is that tenders will be a big part of that, giving employees liquidity. What will be the cadence and sort of increments of that going forward, Sarah?
Yeah, so we are a company that has done tenders to date, and part of that is because we are in a competitive market, particularly for research talent. When I think about what keeps you on that front edge of the best models out there, it is compute, but more importantly, it's people. It's great researchers. And so in order to compete with companies that have liquidity already in their stock, public companies, we have taken this approach to tenders, a little bit like others in the space. SpaceX is a great example.
SpaceX is one we've covered closely, yes.
And so we want to be able to keep doing that. We want to do it thoughtfully and mindfully, knowing that the other rule one is to keep it on the field, make sure we have money for compute. So it's always a balance, but we do think it's important to give our researchers that access.
For our Bloomberg television and radio audience all around the globe, we're in Las Vegas and we're speaking to the OpenAI CFO Sarah Friar. OpenAI is a software company, or it was. Now a lot of the focus is on Sam and the team's ambitions with safeguarding infrastructure. How involved are you in that, talking about the sort of construction of 5 gigawatt data centers and the financing of such things?
Yeah.
Was that a surprise to come in and sort of think, okay, I need to get a handle on that project?
Not a surprise, but definitely a stretch. It's new territory for me.
Stretch from a capital perspective?
Stretch from a capital and also just my own learning, frankly. I think we're all learning in this space. Infrastructure is destiny. It's this wonderful phrase that Chris Lane has managed to get out there in the world. And we do think that this build is important. It's important for U.S. competitiveness. It's important for world productivity. It's important even with a national security lens. And so you are right. One of the key jobs I need to do is to figure out that capital allocation story. It's going to be both working with partners. It's going to be raising financing. But it's always making sure that we are staying ahead of what will be required, call it 2-3 years out, because you can't just turn on compute today if you need it. You actually have to have thought about it probably about 3 years ahead.
On that, if I may, one of the things I heard from some of your investors is you did a very good job early in explaining the basics of the plan, but the ultimate goal is AGI.
That's correct.
How confident do you feel you have that sort of infrastructure in place or a plan to have it for AGI?
I think we have the plan in place. I think if Sam were sitting on this seat, he would tell you AGI is closer than most think. But
He would. What would you say?
I would agree based on what I'm seeing. Like one of the best meetings I get to go to once in a while is the research meeting, and it would blow your mind to see what's already coming and what, as we have learned how to take reasoning models like O1 Preview on top of GPT models and the interplay between those, you're now really starting to see some incredible outcomes, PhD level outcomes, where you have in your pocket human intelligence that is PhD level in physics, in biology, in chemistry, in English literature, like whatever the job is you need to do. If you're a healthcare researcher, if you're a banker, if you're in education, the tool that you are now carrying, the power there, blows my mind.
Sarah, you touched on it a moment ago, financing, the need to raise capital. You've just done a pretty astonishing large round, but a follow-on. I mean, you must have a good sense of the cadence of needing to raise funds on an annual basis. I don't know how you plan it. Yeah,
so it goes back to what you said, which is really understanding in your plan, what are your big expenses? Compute is the biggest, but we also need to run a company. So we have real operating expenses. We're right in the guts right now of FY25 planning. That is usually a 3-year outlook in most companies, and for us it needs to be because we have to make those compute decisions. And with that comes then, okay, what is our balance sheet going to look like? What's our cash burn rate? At what point can we generate enough free cash flow to actually fund the business? Not ready to tell you that today. Okay. That's for the next time we talk. And then on top of that, how do I help keep bringing our syndicate of investors along? I called them kind of with us.
We are less than a week from the election, and I think about my own use of 4.0. I've not used it related to the election, searching for information, but are you preparing for that election, and what impact might it have on OpenAI?
Yeah, we absolutely are. Like, we have to be very mindful from a safety perspective. Today, if you do searching around the election, you'll actually see that often we will not return a response, or we'll return with a caveat that says to be mindful of your sources. And I think I learned a lot of that, frankly, at Nextdoor, right? You cannot, you need to be careful of not being paternalistic or maternalistic around people. People need to be able to find information, make their own educated decisions. But at the same time, you also need to be very aware when you have a platform that today services 250 million people every single week, we have to recognize that they're going to want to do things, and we need to provide avenues, but in a safe and secure way.
OpenAI CFO Sarah Friar here live in Las Vegas. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed.
Good
that was
to catch
great.
up.